Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to Diabetics Doing Things. We're telling the amazing stories of people with diabetes from all over the world. And we're jumping into our first year of practical applications for people with diabetes. We have a very special guest with us today. It's not often that I get other podcasters on this podcast, but occasionally we get to have the pleasure. So, Sami Parker, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rob, for having me. And yeah, I know. Podcaster to podcaster.
It's just like the handshake emoji, like, here we
Yeah,
are.
it is the handshake emoji.
And Eritrea is here in the booth with us as well.
Woo.
So today is actually, you threw me for a little bit of a curveball on our episode because today is your 10th Diaversary. So 10
Yeah.
years with
Yeah.
diabetes today. So I want to talk about that. I want to nerd out a little bit on, for you looking back 10 years,
Yeah.
like what moments
Well,
stand out to you like with diabetes, and like what would you tell yourself like 10 years ago, if you could, visit
yeah.
yourself 10 years ago today, what would you say?
So it was so weird because the last few weeks, I not was preparing for today, but I was like, heck yes, like, what am I going to eat? And I used to love this cereal called Cracklin' Oat Bran. I don't know if you know what that is. But I was like, yes, like, this is what I'm going to eat today. Like, we're going to go balls to the wall. And then I woke up this morning not remembering, and my mom, hit me with that soft text, and then I was like, "Oh, it's today, and it's so anticlimactic, like, I'm getting over being sick," um, and I kinda, for me, had a flashback to my first Diaversary. I, walked downstairs, and my family was all, smiling, and I think unless I'm envisioning that they were this nice, but I think they got me, a balloon or something, I don't know, something sweet, and I just started crying, and I was like, "Oh," and it wasn't, happy tears. It was, the emotions were rolling, and they all looked at me like, "Oh, no." And I was like, "I'm sorry." I just because it was so much to take in. So I think for me, it's cool looking from where I started at first, and not that, that full year was me just crying, but your approach and, how you dealt with it for 1 year compared to now, 10 years. I'm like, "Hell yeah, we're just another 10 to go."
I've been talking recently with people about like when you're in it in that moment, things kind of seem overwhelming, or,
Yeah.
they seem like you're never going to be able to get better at them, and it's very frustrating. And then, if time passes, if you allow time to pass, you can, look back and see that you're handling it now better than you ever thought you would at that time. And, for even like serious things, like you may even write it down, put it in an envelope and open it in a year or something. And like, you'll realize how far you've come and how much progress that you've made. But man, you were diagnosed when you were 12. Like that's a pretty tough time to live with
Yeah.
diabetes. We talk about it a lot on the podcast of like most people look at their teenage years as the most difficult time with diabetes in their life.
Oh my god.
Then that's like right where
It
you started.
was terrible. I'm like, I think I really didn't if I coulda gone back now, and told my 12-year-old self, I would have been like, "Okay, the next 5 years are gonna suck." But then there's, it's gonna get great because every day is still gonna be a good day, even if it's sucky. And I wish I also woulda just said, just take it for what it is and don't stress so much because I think and this isn't to, badmouth parents, no offense, parents, you guys are the great. But, it's kinda tough, I guess, because parents wanna make that perfect range for their child, and my parents weren't that way. Like, if I was high and I was just high for 3 days and I couldn't get down, that's what it was, and we weren't gonna sit there and I wasn't gonna get in trouble. I wasn't gonna be like, "Well, we gotta fake," it was just that's what it was, and we knew I was resistant. Um, Obviously, they weren't like, "Oh, let's just be high all the time." But it was kind of one of those things where they were very, go with the flow with it, and we tried to find the reasonings, but it's also, it's not perfect, and you don't have a balanced life if you're going to try to make it perfect every step of the way, which is something I think it takes a while for a lot of diabetics to learn.
Well, I think too, like giving yourself space to be human.
Yeah.
Eritrea and I talk about that a lot. Like, we're not robots; we are people, and having grace. And also, I think that there's like a performance aspect. I talk a lot about like type one sometimes turns you into very type A, like performance oriented, and you
Yeah.
can't accept yourself if you're not worthy or your blood sugars are not like perfect or like you were saying. So, man, shout out to your parents. I mean, I think being willing to just let you fail or let
Well,
you,
it
be
just
high for a little while.
yeah, it was so tough. Like I all through high school because I deal with adrenal PCOS, so my basically adrenal glands over it's like overproduction of cortisol. And then also for me, so I dealt with that and then I was insulin resistant. And so they were trying it was like my medication just didn't work. Like the insulin was like, which I know we all joke like water, but this was like for 4 years that it was like my A1Cs were just no matter and it wasn't like I was the kid that was in the back seat, just like, screw this. It was like I was checking my blood sugar, giving all my insulin, like counting all my carbs, not eating desserts. And I just had like 9.4, 10.1, 8.9, 8 point, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, and so I think that's something that a lot of times when I ask kids right now that are going through high school, it's like, oh, it's like 6.8. And then their parents, like,
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of times, like, I've talked
yeah,
to parents at conference too, and I think like this is not to, talk down on parents of kids with
no,
diabetes because it's very difficult. And we've had amazing parents on the show, and they're amazing listeners who are parents and caregivers of people with diabetes. But you're trying to be perfect. You're trying to, and your perspective is different as a caregiver because you're like, oh well, here's this acceptable range that's healthy. We got to do whatever we can to stay within that range. And when you're
totally.
outside, even a little bit, like it's unknown. What kind of damage that's causing. And we talk about the C word on this podcast a lot, like complications.
Yeah.
You don't want to open yourself up to those, and it can be scary. And I think operating from a place of fear and fear of the unknown can be difficult for parents. And Eritrea and I have talked a lot about like our dads like couldn't really accept that they did anything wrong or they didn't do anything wrong with us getting diabetes. It was just like a hard thing for my dad specifically to like connect to.
Yeah.
And, so I think there's a lot of like guilt and things hanging over with that as well. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
your A1C is not the end all be all. It's not a reflection on you as a person. Although, there are the acceptable and the ranges that will, make sure that you're helping to avoid
Totally.
those long-term complications.
Yeah, and I think it's
Yeah,
tricky. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
sorry. You said something that I'm just like, wow, like, first of all, your parents sound really, really nice. And
Mm.
also, you said that you couldn't have a balanced life if you're trying to make it perfect every step of the way. And I think that perfectly encapsulates like what diabetes can try to force you to become, which is like perfect, but it's not
Yeah,
possible that that
no,
would be and balanced and have everything at all. Like perfection actually would breed miserable, like to be miserable.
miserable, yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. Because I even sometimes, like, when I'm doing stuff, it's like, "Oh, your blood sugar is 220? Oh my god, you're high." I'm like, "Oh, in diabetes land, like, it's okay." I'm like, that's high, but, like, we're all like, the adrenaline's going, we're dancing, like, it's fine, it'll come down after. And so I think it's, like, just finding that, I don't know, medium. And I think it's easier for kids who get diagnosed younger because you don't have the adult brain yet where you're like, numbers? Oh gosh, I'm not tackling this like an adult. But like, I feel bad for people sometimes that get diagnosed later on because I think some people have no issue, but other people have a really tough time because they see like ranges like on blood work or something and they're like, wait, why is it 170? And they like freak out. And I'm like, no, like 170 would be like chill for like a solid 5 hours. Like that's okay. But it's how we approach it. It's almost like the, imagination of like a child is like allows for that flexibility with numbers. Whereas I feel like
Hmm.
when you get older, you don't allow yourself unless you grew up with it and you still have it in your like system. I don't
Yeah,
know
it's
if that makes
almost like a
sense.
binary, like black and white
Yeah.
looking at it, like high is bad, low is bad, like
Yeah.
only this is in the middle.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it can be tough. I think, we talk a lot about like chasing numbers and like, trying to and like perfection. I think too is there's something in the diabetes community, and maybe you've experienced this a little bit as well of like, we compare our numbers to each other, even without like actively doing it, because you'll see like, oh, a good number, oh, a bad number. And it's like
Hmm.
what I've seen in the past is like people are a lot more actively responding to bad numbers because they feel like there's no judgment for them. Like they feel like it's like the veil is off. Like, oh, Rob's sharing that he's got this blood sugar that's way out of range, and I can relate to that. And it's nice to see somebody who's also going through it
Yeah,
versus this idea of, oh, perfection, perfection. Let's only share the blood sugars that we feel good about, not share all of them.
totally. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Cause I think too, so a lot of people, yeah, anytime I put that out there, it's like, I'm like, "Oh, 380, like, S hormones," and people are like, "OMG, me too." And I'm like, "Okay, 'cause I get it, 'cause it's like no one wants to talk about it. But then I also sometimes feel bad for people when they put good blood sugars. I'm like, nobody's even hyping them up because they're just like, screw you.
Right. They're just
Uh,
like, there's somebody they could be celebrating and they,
yeah.
just get eye rolled.
Yeah.
But there is something too, and I think especially for women, and so I wonder if you've experienced this a little bit. 'Cause
Yeah.
my experience is different. People typically don't give me very much advice, and I like that, so keep that up. But I think when you are opening yourself up to feedback from people in the
Mhm.
community, or just feedback from people in general, living kind of as a content creator, public figure, you are opening yourself up to unwanted feedback and unwanted,
Oh,
unsolicited, so to speak.
1000%. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've had that. So because the PCOS, the adrenal, which a lot of women I know type 1 that are basically like prone to it. And my doctor would like recommend birth controls. And, that's one of those ones that you're never going to have someone give you the exact perfect answer because you're going to have someone yelling at you for taking it, saying it's bad for you. And then you're going to have someone saying it's the only thing that's going to keep your numbers down. And like, one week I'm feeling it, the other week I'm not, or whatever. But it's amazing to me also like the time and energy, yeah, that people take to basically like shoot you down on it. And you're like, okay, I'm sharing, I'm giving you my experience. Take it or leave it. I really don't care. Like,
Mhm.
quite honestly, when I'm talking to the phone, I forget this is even going to people. And then sometimes I'm like, you probably should have like filtered a little more. Um, but I think that's, like, part of what it is too, and, like, I know for me at least, and this is gonna come out mean, I don't like looking at people's Instagrams that it's, like, perfect, like, they have a full face of makeup.
And it's like,
Like,
"Well,
I
it looked
don't
like this." It's like, "No, you didn't."
I'm like, it was like, "Oh my god, today was the best blood sugar day ever." I'm like, "Okay, alright, unfollow."
Well, yeah, and I think, there is that level of transparency that you wanna have where it's, like, authentic, and I
Yeah.
think people are really quick to suss out when it doesn't feel that way.
Oh, totally, and I almost feel like it's only in the diabetes community because all my other friends are like, "Do you follow this influencer?" And I'm like, "What?" And they, like, want to, but then in the diabetes world, you see somebody like that and you're like, "Nope." Like,
Mhm.
canceled. Um, so I think it's yeah, it's definitely interesting, and people definitely wanna share their opinions or like, "No, you're doing this wrong." I'm like, "Guess what? There's no wrong because everybody's diabetes is different." So
That's why I think that as women, it's so important to set boundaries and like shout out the person who taught me glitter glucose. Shout out Paloma.
The
Like
queen of boundaries.
wait, I just was
un-
thinking of that.
unsolicited comment, you will be blocked, baby, because this is not Burger King. You're not gonna have it your way. This is my way. So like, no,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
love having women role models in a space where like what we're not doing and what we're not putting up with is that bullshit. So
No, I can't do it. No, I can't. It's rough. I'm like, this is or it's like, "Come on, did you really wake up and put on a full face of bronzer and blush to make this real? Like, someone help me."
Well, and I think too, like, setting healthy boundaries
Yeah.
as content creators, like, let's talk a little bit about, your year this year. You launched and are part of as the co-host of the Just My Type pod, which you guys
Yes.
launched this year. And like you've opened your life with diabetes up to the diabetes community and the greater public. Um, so like what have you learned in your first year about yourself as well as like learned about the community and like living as like a content creator, public figure, like in the space?
Yeah, so it's actually really it's been interesting because I started the Instagram, I don't know now, like 3 years ago, 3 years ago. But I was very like didn't really go on it, didn't follow people. Like I'm not gonna just follow random people, but then soon, you learn like that's what you do. And I was like very confused by it because I was like, wait, people are just what are they talking about? And then kind of when I started like posting more just like workouts and nutrition because that was my undergrad degree. Like I'm in master's for that. Super interested. And randomly it'd be like I met a type 1 here, type 1 there, and then they'd follow and be like, "Oh, it's really helpful when you like talk about this, this, this." And then when we launched the podcast, which was so cool, but basically how that worked is I got asked, I was like working as kind of a partnership with like this one company and they were like, "Hey, we have like an opening. Basically, we want to launch a podcast that's like a type 2 with a type 1 and just talks about anything and everything, like nothing really censored." Um, and I mean, I love talking, so I was like, "Oh, so funny how that works. I graduate in December. I'll take it, if you'll have me." So I've had the interview with them, and it kind of just worked out that me and Dobie, my co-host, just like clicked. Like it worked. And honestly, he was skeptical because he heard like 22-year-old girl from California. He was like, "What the heck?" And then I was thinking like, "Okay, wait, what? He's from where? Like Milwaukee? Huh?" And it kinda just worked, and so it was really cool because we basically just wanted to create that space to talk about everything diabetes related and kind of, like, all the diabetes shiz that happens and random things or even, like, I joke, I say it's pulling the D card, like, I always pull the D card, I mean, like, that's how I if I'm really having a bad day, I'm like, "I'm pulling it today." Like, today's not the day to mess with me. And it's just fun to kind of create that kind of stuff with Dobie and that content and diabetes words and whatnot. But it's really been cool because I've met everybody since then. Like in terms of like all the connections right now, I feel like I know of people or through Instagram. It's been through the podcast because we get to hear just like, obviously you get to hear everybody's story, what they did, how they want to move forward, what they've accomplished, what the hardest things were, what's inspired them. And that's been the most rewarding thing out of everything, because now it's like, ooh, I like in my head, I have a question like, "Oh, I wonder if somebody knows that. Oh, let me text like Bella Kruger, like, or wait, Krieger. That's how they pronounce it. Like, let me text her, or it's just funny, or even like, Laura, let me text Laura. And it's just easy. And before I didn't have that. And so that's been really interesting too, and how it impacts the approach. Because I think even before that, like I was so confident with diabetes and didn't care, but you still feel like you're like, okay, well, I'm putting myself like everybody sees and does it, but now I want to like do good in my area. And so I feel like this has given me the opportunity to like reach and find out information and provide resources for people, hopefully. Not sure if I'm succeeding in that way, but yeah.
It's just interesting though, like you said, you kinda like you're living your life with diabetes, and this is my experience too, like 10 years basically on your own, so to speak, and you have
Yeah.
your friends or peers that you've met. Maybe you went to diabetes camp, like maybe you met somebody at a community event of some kind, but you don't have this like community, like these people that you know by name, or at least know by Instagram handle, and you can like DM them and be like, "Hey, I have a question about this," or "Hey, oh, this person knows this person knows this person, and I can connect you to them." And like
Yeah.
that's I think been the biggest thing. I say this like corny phrase, like a friend with diabetes is a friend indeed, because like they can just demystify all the stuff you're going through. Like they've definitely been through it before, and if they haven't, they know somebody who has, and they can either link you to the post where they're talking about it, or they can just introduce you to the person directly. And like I lived 10 years of my life with diabetes without having that, and it's just such a
Yeah.
huge life hack. It's something. Uh, there's a lot of research articles, rhetoric around the negatives around social media, but truly one of the positives is getting connected to communities like the diabetes community, and where you can level up your life really quickly. I don't know if you guys can hear the snap on the audio, but you can level it up really quickly uh, when you know the right people, know the right place to go.
No, I completely agree because even, I'm one of those people that I kind of get over my Instagram, not my diabetes one, but I joke when I say to my friends, like, I'm deleting my Instagram. And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, no, 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 not my type one. That's totally different. I'm deleting regular Instagram because it's so night and day in terms of like what the priority is of that account and
Right.
what the need is for it. And it's even with like, I had a negative skew on TikTok. Like I refused to get TikTok for like, I don't know how many years it was. Hated it, was like, "I'm never touching this," because all I saw was, like, girls that were in high school dancing, and I was like, "Okay, I grew up dancing, and you would never see me putting my booty on the camera." Like, just that wasn't me, and that's all I viewed it as, and then I finally had people who almost, like, sat me down, like, "You have to understand that, the diabetes community is also there," and I was like, "What?" Like, "Huh?" And then my best friend Erica was like, really, she's like, look, I saw this girl. And I was like, and then it was like a whole new world. And I was like, wait, what is happening now? Which that one's hard for me because it takes me a little time to make those videos. So I'm like, Instagram is kind of easier. But in general, like it's funny how, yeah, we skew social media in different ways. Like I hated it, hated regular Instagram, but then with diabetes or any kind of cause, I'm like, "Oh my god, it's the best thing ever." Like, even if you would have asked me, would you have met you for like, I would never have been like, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna meet Rob in Dallas," through, like, the Just My Type podcast, and we're just gonna, like, talk, and now I can just DM him something funny.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it's so wild.
It's amazing how like quickly you
Yeah.
can develop those relationships too. That's something that when you talk about diabetes, meetups and like,
Mhm.
Zooms or live chats, we don't have to explain what we're doing. Like I think that's the power of like community meetups. You don't have to say, "Hey, I'm Rob and I live with diabetes," which means I have to do all this stuff. It's like, oh, we can just skip all of that and just get down to like, oh, this is who I am as a person. This is what I'm interested in. Like this is, and we can relate to each other on a level that it's way deeper than just any other person that you've met on the street, right? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, super important. Would highly encourage anyone, and Eritrea put this in the chat, like, if you have a diabuddy, people with diabetes have 40% better control than people who don't. So I mean, right there.
Wow.
That's
Well,
Eritrea, the fact machine.
I was gonna ask you something too. Do you think, um I don't know, like, if this is me, but I used to when, like, there's just different nothing against support groups are great. But before, like, whenever I would hear someone's like, "Oh, they have a support group for this," or, "Oh, that," I'd be like, "Oh, I don't wanna go to one of those." And for some reason, though, I don't know if it's because it's, like, voluntarily you're doing it, it's not like you're being
Right.
forced into it. But with diabetes, I'm like, "Oh, no, it's so different, though, with the support group." Like, these people aren't, like, random people, whatever. It's like I know right away what they've been through. I know that they have a down to earth level because they deal with diabetes, which is a full time job, and anybody who deals with it, you're a badass. So I'm like, right away, I know. But it's funny because before, when I heard support group, I'd be like, hell no, I'm not going to a support group. Like what? And then voluntarily, you're like, oh no, it's just like my like friends that have diabetes. Like you find a way, it's just funny. I don't know. That's
I think support group just is a terrible name,
it's
and
so
it
bad.
carries a lot of connotation with it. Because like,
Yeah.
what is this even right here than
Yeah.
just a digital support group? And
Yeah.
it's a little bit more passive. Same thing on Instagram. Like, you don't have to share. Nobody's gonna call you out or like point at you. Like, you can like just kind of do it on your own time, which I
Totally.
think is, and like everybody's different. There are people who like never post, who like literally
Hmm.
every single one of my diabetes posts, and it's like I don't know anything about them, but I
No.
know that they connect with diabetes. So it's
Yeah.
like you really never know, and that's why I encourage people. When I used to go speak at events like pre-COVID,
Yeah.
like share your story. It really doesn't matter what it is. It just matters that you say, "Hey, I'm here, and this is me," because you'll find somebody who connects with that. And so,
Totally,
yeah,
1,000%.
it's great to see that happening for other people, like in different ways. You, as part of the passive support group that is Diabetes Instagram, you post a series called Diabetic Reality, which is you dropped your D card post, which is like I think was hilarious and very funny. Like what realities with diabetes that you share have gotten like the biggest response, and like what diabetic realities do other people share with you like as a result?
Yeah, I have to look really quick. So what's funny is I just like sometimes making like random posts on like Canva. Like I don't know. I was like, oh, I'm gonna start a Canva thing because I was doing this internship and she was using Canva. So I like made one. I was like, oh, this is so funny. It's like a diabetic reality. And for some reason, I don't know why, it was like the weirdest thing. I was like, oh, I guess people like they like liked it. And I was like, this is so funny. It was weird. Like there was no brain power going towards like, oh, maybe if I post this, people will like it was purely I thought it was funny. No one in my family thought it was funny. But I was like, whatever. So they were like, what? It was if I'm the first one I ever did was if I'm being a bitch, my blood sugars are probably 300. And they were like, ah. I was like, hey guys, come on, it's funny. Like nobody, my mom's like, bitch on Instagram. I'm like, no,
Such a mom
I
thing
asked
to.
her it. I'm like, it's fine. So, so that one was a good one, which I was like, that's a fair one because I mean, people get it. The other one is people love to hear that your job is diabetes. Like I one day was literally at the gym and I was like 300, like frick me. And I'm like running. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm a pancreas. Like it just was like in my head. And I was like, my job is literally a pancreas. And it just that one came to my head in that way, which was such a random one, but that one was a good one people liked. Um, There's been some funny ones, and then I just kinda started stuck with it. The other one was that, that general one where you make it's basically now I think it's up to, like they've done studies, and the latest one was, like, 230 decisions, but the standard one before was, like, if you make 180 more decisions a day, which I feel like when I tell people, they, like, think I'm lying, you know? I don't know. I don't know if that happens to you, but they're like, "No, you don't. You just take insulin when you eat." I'm like, "Sure, whatever you
Just the
say."
marker. Have you done the marker thing? That's a really cool one. I did
Right.
like
No, what's that?
every time you think about diabetes, like with a hopefully you're not as stupid as I am, don't use a permanent marker. But
No, did you use Sharpie?
I was dumb. Yeah, it was like the markers. Okay. But also
Just
we were in a
tattooed.
pandemic. We were in a pandemic. But anyway, the point is every time I thought about diabetes, I was like one little line. And then by the end of the day, it was like my whole arm was covered. It was a little intense. Like I was like, Eritrea, did you really think about diabetes much? But no, really, it's just in the background. Like,
Oh, yeah,
Something
like
too, I think that we forget, like, and now, and again, like not everybody has a CGM, not everybody uses one, but I feel like in the diabetes community, for the most part, like they're pretty commonly used, widely used. And so, when it's on your phone and or on your pump and you could just check it whenever you think about it, it's way easier than it used to be where you're like, you got to manually do your finger stick. And so I had like one of my sensors failed and it was a couple days delayed on the shipment, so I had to go without the sensor for a few days. And I was like, man, like I'm testing my blood sugar like 18 times a day because like so used to being able to look at it
yeah.
anytime. And you just forget like how many times and like how many minutes that takes. And then you got to make the time, you got to figure out like, do I correct? Do I, eat
Oh,
something? Like what's the reaction response? And yeah, that 180, the number, even though that's totally false and like that study didn't exist, it just like somebody said it somewhere and it just like picked up momentum. It's wild. But
that's so true, though, because I even just now, I was, like, looking to see the picture, and I was looking at my Dexcom. Like, I right away went to my Dexcom. I'm like,
right,
"Hold
like
on.
just you're just like opening it up because that's why
What
else
is
would you open
wrong
your
with
phone, right?
me?"
Get
Yeah.
get your number. So like, yeah, it really is. So it's tough. Like even people like yourself who are very outspoken about their diabetes, like still deal with like people not realizing like what a big deal it is to live with
No.
diabetes. And I think like even me, like I think I've called out of work. I remember it was in like 2019. It was the first time I ever had to like get out of a meeting because of my diabetes. I was like, I gotta go. I'm literally dying. Like my blood
Yeah.
sugar was like 450 and I had a occluded site and I just like wasn't getting any insulin. And I was like, I gotta go now. So,
Yeah.
but that was the first time that I had the confidence to do that and like make a big deal out of it. And people responded
Yeah.
in a way that I was kind of uncomfortable with. Like they were way more worried about it
Yeah,
after
then
than
you
I
are.
was.
And
Right.
then you're like, "Oh, wait, people care?" Oh.
Right, which is even weirder. It's just like, "Oh my god, don't look at me."
Yeah. No, it is. It's true though. I even like I said, so this was funny because some people asked me what it meant. Like people, I don't know if they were diabetic. I think like they had people in their life that were. But I said one of them was like nighttime is living in like another day for a diabetic. It really is. Like if I wake up and I slept through the night fully and really hard and like I wake up and my eyes are swollen, I go, "Oh, we have a high blood sugar." And then I look and it's like 350 and I'm like, "Yeah, and that's why she was out cold." But it's funny because people ask me that and I was like, "Oh, well, you have to check your blood sugar like in the middle of the night or your CGM goes off or sometimes blah, 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 blah." And he was like, "What? You check in the middle of the night?" I'm like, "Well, yes, it's the same thing. It's just this thing called the sun goes down and, but we still have it." And he was
Right,
like,
like, you still have to manage it actively.
"Yes." He was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." I was like, "No, it's okay." But it was funny. And, even like people ask, does it hurt anymore with your like shots? Cause I'm on injections and I'll be like, yeah, sometimes. And if I'm with them in one shot, like sometimes lately they've been hurting. I don't know why, but I like put it in, I'm like, oh, and then someone's like, you okay? And I'm like, no, I'm fine. It's still a needle.
Yeah,
I say it
just
doesn't
just
hurt, but it's
surprise me.
still,
so since you do syringes, this is like such a random question. I used
yeah.
to like my favorite used to be when you get a shooter. So like, have you ever like given yourself a shot and then you pull it out and for some reason the blood goes like it like shoots out of your
And
arm?
so I haven't, well, a long time ago, because I'm on the flex pens, but a
Okay.
while back, I had like, what was it? I was injecting and I pulled it out and the blood like went in the tube in the pen and then also like shot. And my sister and I were like, "Woo!" And I was like, it like went on my
Diabetes things
mirror.
happen that like don't make sense, but make sense. That you're just like, oh, I guess that I'm bleeding right now. Okay, what
Yeah,
is
and
this?
I was
Why
like,
is it always like that too? That's like, oh, you don't even really notice, and you're just like, oh my god, there's blood all over my arm.
yes.
Here we are.
I was like in the gym and I had just given a shot and I was like walking and I was like, why is this girl like aggressively staring at me right now? Like she always sees me do this. And then I realized it was like full on dripping. And I'm like, oh, sorry.
Got it.
I was like, sorry, I have diabetes. It's all good. Yeah. And I was like, we're good. She was like literally looking at me so confused. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna shut up now. But
So kind of continue to talk about like you're a content creator with diabetes. You are working on a podcast. What are you doing when you're not doing that? When you're what's your life outside? You talked about the gym. You talked about running, getting outside, being active.
yes.
Like what's your life like when you're not being a content creator with diabetes?
So I'm in online grad school for exercise physiology. And the goal there is basically I want to eventually create a space that is workouts for type 1 specifically. And also PCOS. So I kind of am hoping that's like the goal there. So with the masters, I'll be able to become an exercise physiologist. But then I'm also in the works of about to get certified for personal training. Just so I'm, qualified so people aren't like, what is she doing? So that's kind of the goal because I love exercise and obviously diabetes. But I'm always at the gym. I'm doing grad school. I like to still, I don't know, I'm an outdoorsy person. I live by the beach. So I like to go and just kind of be around there, watch the sunset, do all that stuff. And yeah, I don't know. It's been weird post grad, like undergrad, because I said it's like a very weird transition phase. And when you're doing grad school, you're like, wait, I can't really do what I want to do right now, but I like have to do something. So what do I do? But yeah, I've kind of I forgot the big one. I dance. Duh. Um, so that's my thing. I like grew up dancing since I was 2, teach dance. I go take dance classes down at like in LA and different studios down there. And then I also am I don't know, she might kill me for saying this out. Well, actually she did post on her Instagram, so it's fine. But Miss Laura from You're Just My Type 1 is trying to make a dance class in January. More details to come, but I'll be doing the dance class.
Oh, exciting.
So yeah, that's like my biggest
Laura's a
passion.
big friend of the pod. So
She's the best.
yeah, she's awesome, and I love all the different like boys and girls events and
Yeah,
like men events and like women's events that she's doing in LA, Southern
it's so
California.
cool.
We've got
Um,
some stuff in the works for her to potentially come do one in Dallas. So that's another
that
teaser.
would be so
But,
fun and so cool. I might have to like venture out for that one.
well, yeah, all are welcome. So like talking about next year, we're already like kind of in there.
I
So
know.
you're in grad school, like we're towards the end of the year, we're recording in the middle of December. This will go live in January, so it's a perfect time to ask about like what's on your like 2023 vision board. Like, what are you planning? Any big plans for the new year? Are you a resolutions gal? Like, what's kind of on your what's on your 2023 vision?
So I think for me, I've realized with resolutions, like they're so great. And I love making a list. And I always will stick to like 1 or 2, especially if it's like, maybe be more compassionate or maybe don't jump the gun and settle with your thoughts before you speak, like certain things like that. Um, one of my
Those are like really good, I would say.
I don't jump the gun and think before you speak, Eritrea. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, me. Um, there's also a part of me that like before one of them was Diet Coke, but I quit that one. So I'm like, huh. But I kind of like the New Year's resolution to be like not a time to reflect because I know people like, do their whole like, oh my God, this year was amazing. Like 2022 back, that whole thing. But I would say I kind of like to almost do it as like a refresher for what my goals are and like what I still want my intentions to be for the year. Because I feel like it's easier to lose sight of your intentions than necessarily to constantly be like adding so many things on your plate that you can't handle it all. So I almost like to keep it like balanced and then I just swap out things that I realize I need to like drop and then add and I want to accomplish this or maybe I still like doing this content but maybe I should make it all look like this and that kind of thing. But in terms of like the diabetes community, I would say Kind of, I just wanna more bring awareness to a lot of different people that might not necessarily, like you said, be active on Instagram, because I've had a lot that have basically mentioned, like, stories to me or something, and I'm like, "Why don't you share that?" Like, that's something that's so, like, valuable, and I've been looking for someone to give me that advice or, like, experience, but, I mean, I guess that's what the diabetes podcasts are for. They're pulling people's stories.
Yeah, I really like what you were saying though about like the routine or like the rhythm of like setting the resolutions and like the intention behind it because then like to me like so much of our lives like roll in this like rhythm and this like calendar that we are not really in control of but we just sort of especially in the west just sort of adapt to like school
Yeah,
like back to school in August,
totally.
fall, Halloween, Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, spring break, on and on and on, repeat, repeat, repeat. Um, and then like kind of in the like adult world, like you said, you're making that transition like from like college, undergrad to grad school, and like
Yeah,
what we olds call the real world. And then you're like supposed to be on all the time. Like there is no like seasonality. There is no like, oh, back to school. Like you're just sort of like a
no.
professional. You're just an adult forever after that. And I think it's really important to have those rhythms where you like look back on the year and you say like, "Oh, well, this was good or this was bad or I'd like to improve on this or I'd like
Mhm.
to avoid this." And I think for me at least, like the end of the year is a good time for that. It like allows for a little bit of
Yeah,
reflection. It allows for a little bit of like improvement or, adding some things. And I think like what you're talking about, it's easy to just put a bunch of stuff on a list that never gets done.
totally.
But if you're, intentional about it and you give yourself like a little space and grace like we talked about at the beginning, yeah, maybe it is like a big opportunity to be more compassionate, or maybe you could help avoid some of
Yeah.
the things that were difficult this year by not jumping the gun and like thinking before you speak. And like I think those types of things are really long lasting resolutions. They're not just like a year. They're not just like a moment in time. It's like a
No,
good
I
thing to do
agree. 'Cause
holistically as a person.
yes, exactly. Because I think it's so, like, I don't know, especially just with how we are in society. Like, I am the worst culprit. My parents, when they're listening to this, they're gonna be like, "Oh, she finally said it, like, she knows she does too much." Because 'Cause I'm the person that's like, "Well, I didn't do all I did today was, like, work, go to dinner, take a walk, and, like, hang out with so and so." And they're like, "What?" Like,
Yeah,
that was,
that's
like,
like seven
7.
things.
Yeah, they're like, "That was, like, 7 things." I'm like, "Guys, it's fine. Like, everybody needs to get off my back." So I feel like I am the culprit of doing a lot of things, and I think that's, like, the biggest thing, like you were saying about improving. Like, I have to get better at minimizing and then prioritize. So it's like, I think I don't know, even for me right now, I'm working at this fun I don't know if you know the brand Viore. Do you know that brand?
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm, like, working for fun at the shop, and I was like, "Yes, get my discount, like, amazing, whatever, I'll do it for fun." But then I'm over there and I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing that," but then I'm also trying to get certified, and then I'm in grad school, but then I'm babysitting, then I'm doing the podcast. Like, it's just
Doing all the
too
things,
much.
diabetics doing things.
Yeah, exactly. Which and I think it's hard, though, because like I said, when you're in that weird phase, nothing is like concrete 9 to 5 unless it's a job, which is why like I was doing that because I liked having the 9 to 5. But then it's like, okay, well, I'm not at that phase yet. Like I have to get all the stepping stones to get there. And I think that's just in general for anybody, even an adult. I feel like it's okay. My kids are like my mom, for example, she's going through a weird, my sister's getting married. So she's getting all like emo, you know? I was like, oh my God, she's moving out. Like, and I was like, but I feel like it's all about like how to enhance next year and, look back, reflect, and move forward in an exciting way and look at the silver lining with it. So I don't know. That's kind of why I like New Year's because I feel like it's a silver lining and you're like, no bad blood, like only good vibes only. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's opportunity for a fresh start. It's
yeah,
also kinda like you can turn the page on a new year, and,
totally.
take inventory and hopefully leave the things, like, behind that you don't wanna take with you and bring the good stuff with you along the way. I think it's good. I think it's just it could become trivial, but I think if you
Yeah.
treat it with intention and care, like, you can really allow yourself opportunity to explore, new horizons and open yourself up to new opportunities, and, again, like, back to just giving yourself grace and, like, the way that you talk to yourself, like, what kind of language are you using when you look at
Yeah.
like the last year? Like, are you looking at it with judgment? Are you giving yourself grace? It's okay to want to improve. It's okay to look at a number or look at a goal and say, oh, well, we didn't really hit this. We didn't really meet the expectation. We didn't really win. How can we do better? Um, but, to do so without giving yourself judgment or grief and, allowing yourself to, have space to grow.
Yeah. No, I completely agree 1,000%.
Then, Rob, without giving yourself judgment or grief. I wish I could be more like you.
Hey, well, the reason I'm so well versed on it is because I have to practice it all the time. I was
Yeah.
you were talking about Sammy, you were talking about doing a lot of things. Like
Yeah.
I asked myself, like, it was one of my journal kind of questions the other day, was like, what would less look like? What would a life with less look like? And like, asking, do I need some more space? Do I need to do a few less things? Like give myself, not
Yeah.
uh, not stretch the rubber band so tight. My sister told me something recently, a couple of years ago. She's like, the brightest candle burns out the fastest. So, you got to make sure, like, even when you have a big light to shine, like, make sure that you are doing so in a way that's still, still good for you and still sustainable. So,
Yeah.
diabetics doing things like we're doing all the things we love doing,
Yeah, you are.
but you got to make sure that, you're taking care of yourself as well.
No, 1,000%, which I struggle at sometimes.
Hey, it's good
But
to talk about that. That's why the podcast is here, right? We don't have
we're
to
on the
have
up
to
and
make
up.
everything perfect, right? We don't have we can just be who we are.
Yeah.
So Sammy, you're on the Just My Type pod. You guys had me on a guest earlier this year, so we'll
Yes.
include the links to the podcast. But you're also on Instagram, so go ahead and plug yourself where our listeners can find you.
Yeah. So we're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Just My Type Pod _ and Facebook at Just My Type Pod. And you can also find us online at justmytypepodcast.com.
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome.
And you can find me at Type 1 Sammy. I'm forgetting my username. Type 1 Sammy.
Well, Type 1 Sammy, thank you so much for coming on the
Thanks for
podcast.
having me. I was so
Happy
excited.
Diaversary. Happy 10 years. That's a
Thanks.
big one.
I know this is actually like the best diversity I've had. I never get to talk to other diabetics on my diversaries.
I was very psyched when I saw your post this morning. I was like, wow, we're gonna get to talk to you on your Diaversary. I don't
Heck
know if that's
yeah.
a first, but it's definitely one of the few. Definitely a
It's
pretty
okay.
rare
I'll
opportunity.
pretend it's the first.
Okay, good deal. Good deal. All right. Well, Sammy, thanks so much for coming on the show, and keep it locked on Diabetics Doing Things, everybody. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks.